Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
So today is Thursday, January 19th, 2023. My name is Kelly Carroll, and I have the pleasure of chairing CPARB, the Community Policing Advisory Review Board in Bennington. Before we begin, I would like to introduce my fellow board members, so we'll start down here.
Hi, Robert Ebert.
I'm Marsh Hudson-Knapp.
I'm Will Greer.
Jeff Vickers.
We have Scott Richmond, who will be hopefully joining us later by Zoom. And then with us tonight, we also have our Select Board Liaison, Tom Haley. And then we have Jim Vines on Cat TV, and thank you very much for being here and covering this so that people can see this. And then we also have Brian Core, who will be here doing some training from us. And Brian is from the Cambridge Consulting Services Corporation. Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. The minutes of the previous, so the consent agenda has been approved. The minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes? No. Okay. Hearing no corrections, can I get a motion to approve the December meeting minutes? Okay. Can I get a second?
A second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the December meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? No. Any abstentions? Okay. Next on our agenda is our public service or public comment. The purpose of public comment is so that everyone can be involved in an informative and productive use of the public comment period at our meeting. So we do ask that the topic not be related to an agenda item, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. They should not be very interactive as far as a lot of back and forth. If that's the case, we'll consider putting that as a future agenda item. And if you do have something when you come up, we ask that you please state your name and your town of residence. So, do we have anybody for public comment? Jack?
Hello, my name is Jack Rossiter-Munley. I'm from Bennington, Vermont, and I think several members of the review board are aware of this from their attendance at select board meetings. But I wanted to make the group aware that there is a new group in town called Bennington Cares that has formed around providing community support for the Bennington schools, motivated by an article that was recently in VT Digger about just how frequently police are being called to specifically Bennington Elementary. But that group has really dedicated itself to learning more about the schools, learning more about how to provide holistic community support, and has already undertaken some actions after its first couple of meetings, including writing letters of support to teachers. And particularly because it was motivated by learning about the way in which the schools are currently having to rely on the police, I wanted to make sure specifically to come to the review board with the knowledge that this group exists and exists to provide community support to the schools. If anyone is interested who may be watching, they can find out more about the group at benningtoncares@gmail.com, and the next meeting will be this Sunday at 11:30 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Bennington, which is at 108 School Street. And everyone is invited to come along. It has been a wonderful learning experience, and I think I speak for the members of the group when I say we've been really humbled by just how much we don't know as community members about what's happening in our schools, which is so important in terms of providing a community to raise children. And one of the other things that the group has undertaken is finding folks who might be interested in becoming more involved in possibly running for school board seats in the upcoming election. And I'm going to be running for select board.
Oh, great.
Thank you, Jack. Are there any other comments from the public?
So, hello, piggybacking off that, my name is Jonathan Phipps. Some of you know me, I'm the Southwest Vermont Supervisor Union Equity Coordinator. I'm just here to propose an idea of, I spoke with a couple of you by email, I'm sure, but to propose an idea of collaboration and doing a community forum with our populace so that we can have an understanding on how citizens of the Bennington area can achieve measures of accountability, whether it's dealing with law enforcement or the school system or whatever. So I would love to hear back from you guys via email and a given due time. I just wanted to put that out there, and I have to actually bounce because it's about to snow where I live, so sorry about that.
Hi, Jonathan, we had emailed earlier today, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet you earlier this afternoon, but the forum ran over and we had the meeting here, so I'm so grateful that you were able to come to the meeting, and I will be in touch, and we can certainly set up an introductory meeting, and then we can take next steps from there. It's okay. Thank you. Do we have any other public comments? All right. Hearing none, thank you. We will get into the communications on the agenda, which are the committee updates. Can I have a motion? Nope, don't need it. Okay. So let's talk about the committee updates. Thank you for my learning curve. Do we have, Marsh, do you have any on the
Will
review?
does.
Will, okay.
Okay, so for the research review committee, the RRC, I'll read off the charge that Marsh and I both agreed on. It's a little back and forth, but we finally came to an agreement on the final statement, so I'll read it aloud. The research review committee, RRC, aims to construct and develop procedures used by established policing and oversight review processes. This will create opportunities to understand how other departments and police systems manage the critical insight and feedback of the public to improve and advise on Bennington Police Department practices and procedures. The RRC will utilize training and resources provided by the town that will allow recommendations to be made for the review processes executed by CPARB. The RRC will explore best practices and measures to help CPARB manage its responsibilities in performing reviews.
Wow.
The fruit of
Can
two
it-
talkers.
Do I need a, yeah, do we need a motion? Okay, so can we, any discussion on this?
Yeah, we'd love to.
Because, yeah, so my feedback is I would like to have it electronically so that I have a chance to look at it and really get a grasp on it as opposed to just having it read. So if you can get that to me, then I will distribute it out to the rest of the board, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting when it comes through. All right, next committee, Robert?
Communications?
Communications.
Okay, thank you. At our December meeting, the board established a communications committee, initially comprising myself, Jeff Vickers, and Scott Richmond. We have come up with a charge as well as a communications plan. Now, Scott, I know for sure, and I think Jeff want to take a look at it a little bit more. So this is not, we're not asking for the board to adopt. This is kind of a status report of what we've come up with so far. I'll go ahead and read the charge.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there, Robert. I think if the charge is something that was going to be done in a committee, I think that it should be done with you and Jeff and Scott, and you should kind of agree to it and then bring it back to the board. So I'm going to ask that that also gets put off until the next month
okay.
so that they have an opportunity, because it is supposed to be the committee.
Right. Okay. You all have it in your packets. You've got
I handed that out this evening.
a copy of the charge
Yes,
as well
but they
as
have
the
not had a chance to look at it
draft.
ahead of time
Right.
because Jeff and Scott did not see it, and I did
Well-
not think it was appropriate to send out a committee report without all of the committee members being, so we'll,
Right.
if you can just set that up and then between now and the February meeting,
I hope.
and then
I'm
we can go
trying.
through the charges on the February meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other updates on committees? I think that was it. No? Okay. Brian, what do you think about coming on a few minutes early? I bet you could hear that.
Yeah,
No.
I have a quick question.
Oh,
Are we
sure.
doing upcoming agenda items or voting on other motions?
I don't think we have any other motions to vote on.
Well, I wanted to propose one real quick. I don't know if we can.
It wasn't on the agenda, so, yeah. So I think you need to send that out, and we'll add it to the agenda possibly for next time, depending on what it is and how the time goes.
It relates to that, so.
Okay.
We'll talk about
Okay. All right.
So are we going to be talking about agenda items for next time, or do you have them already?
I think we're going to be going right into the CPARB training, and on the next agenda, the town has Merrill here to do training, so I think it'll be just the basic standing items, public comment, of course, and the standing items. And then the agendas the next couple of months are pretty packed with training. The town, for those of you that did go to the select board or watch the select board meeting, the town has contracted with Brian to do some training for us. There's going to be 2 trainings during our CPARB meeting and then a couple of Saturday trainings throughout the year. And because of that, our meetings are pretty much just going to be scaled back to minimum standing items and public comment. And emergency items, I should say. All subject to change because agendas can change. So anyway, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you and hopefully you can hear.
I can, and hopefully you can still hear me, so.
Yes, thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to keep working with the town. It's hard to believe it's been, this is I guess, yeah, it's the 3rd calendar year in the 2nd year of working with Bennington. It's really been gratifying. So I'm glad to have the continued opportunity. And sorry I'm not there in person, but I will be up there, assuming everything works out with the weather and travel. But I plan to be there in February. So I think I just want to say quickly, I'm not going to do a lot of framing. I know those of you who work with me know I like to frame things and do a lot of front loading. But I really just wanted to say that this whole training over the course of the year is to serve your work, to serve the work of the board and its committees, and to serve the town of Bennington. So, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of, I don't know if it's my end. It sounds like there's wind rushing by.
Did Jonah leave? Is Jonah still?
Not gonna
You're coming through clear for us, Brian.
Okay. Well, whenever that was, it just stopped. So
maybe it was me.
Talk about it. Don't go away. Okay.
My breathing sounds like wind. I'm full of hot air.
I'll just work through it. So I really want you to feel like you can say, I know this is what was in your proposal and what the select board approved. We feel like we need to focus on different things, that sort of thing. And I will work with Kelly as the chair to figure those things out. But really, this is to support the work that you're doing and support the community and its needs. So it's happening again. I'm just going to get used to this. So.
That's not me this time.
Having said that, my plan for today is to spend some time working with you just to help think about what a community listening session would look like, what you would want from it. I'm really glad to hear there's now a communication subcommittee or committee. And I know that throughout the process of the task force, communication listening has been a big thing. So the idea is to, and this comes through conversations with the select board in working out the scope of work, what would be the purpose? I mean, there's a broad purpose of hearing from the community, but what would you really hope to be getting out of this? How would it be set up? I think my thought is that, and again, this is subject to what will work, but my thought has been that I could be a good person to actually do the facilitation of that session as an outside person who's familiar with the community, but again, that's all to be figured out over the months to come. The timeline that we were looking at was doing something in June, perhaps Saturday, June 3rd, and again, I said before the meeting got started, I'm a little tired, I've had a lot to do in my own work, so if I get a little detail wrong, you can let me know, and we'll fix it, or I'll just go, oh, that's what it says. So, please don't get stuck on any of those things.
Brian, I don't think Brian, I don't think we decided on a date for the June listening session. I think that was something we were going to talk about.
Exactly. All right. So I have a few dates held in my calendar. We'll figure that out. So, again, having said all that, I really just want to open up the discussion to, maybe a few minutes, and I'd ask everyone, if you have something to say, to, please share what you would see as the pretty specific goals of a listening session. And I would say for, some examples would be, we really want to gather information from certain parts of the community, or we really need to hear from everybody in the community. We want to make sure that people know what we're communicating, and we want to make sure we hear back from them that we are communicating effectively. It could be a chance for people to vent, to share specific stories, their histories, their legacies. So there are a lot of different things, and you probably want to do more than one of those things, but I really always encourage people to think about what are one or two things that you really want to accomplish. So let me stop talking and kind of open it up to some conversation. Maybe we can take about 5 or 10 minutes and just people can share and talk through what are you hoping that a broad open community session would accomplish. And then I think that helps us to think about the work to get there, what kind of listening and feedback and input we need before you actually get to a big public session. So again, what would you be hoping for? What would be some of the goals that you would want to achieve with a community listening session? And it's hard, I can't really call on people because you're really tiny on my screen.
I'll start.
I have to trust you all to self-regulate.
Yeah. I would like to, this is going to be our first community event as a board for outreach. And I'm hoping that it not only introduces us more and makes that human connection, but can start to build the basis of trust and getting that dialogue going back and forth. Because it's fine for us to come in here and say what we think, but I think it's better for us to be able to hear from people in the community and what they think. So, and I hope that it just starts to build the trust.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
So I have 2 cents forever. And one of them is that people can feel safe to share whatever they have to say without worries of retribution or being targeted. Another thing that I think I hope for is for us to be able to do this in places where people who feel like they're on the margins feel safe to be and safe to gather. Those are the 2 things that stand out first in my mind. I guess the third thing is hoping that we can find some way of doing this so that there is good, wide, varied participation.
All right, and I don't want to dig too much, but let me just ask Marsh, when you say a place where people can feel safe, are you thinking about a specific physical gathering where everybody can feel safe, or are you thinking maybe there are multiple phases or steps so that people can feel safe in their participation?
B. Multiple. Okay. I'm thinking about geography, but I'm also thinking about whatever kinds of frameworks we set up that can make people feel like they can talk without retribution or judgment.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful.
Can I ask, is this a one-time event at one location? Is that the plan?
So I think, this group is going to develop the plan. My goal is to help you develop that. I think the traditional thing, and there's a lot of value in having a kind of big gathering that people can come to, so it feels really open to everybody, and it's not, oh, we're going to talk to these people and those people, but it's really up to you. I think that part of what I'm hoping we can talk about now and a bit next time we meet is to talk through what do you really think based on your experiences, based on what you know, what is the best way to do this? So I mean, my assumption is that there's a big listening session, but that is just a place to start the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So we've heard from a couple people. Other thoughts about what you would want to get out of this listening session?
Well, this is just more of a comment because some of us just left a forum. for the Vermont Judicial on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it was a 1-hour forum, and I really thought that that was too short. So I don't know if it's something that and again, we're going to talk, should it be one large one, or should it be, multiple small ones? But we had to leave to get back here, and I just felt like it was just starting to get going after about an hour, so that would be my input.
Good.
I'll ask my question. Oh gosh. Wait, hold on. I'm gonna let me rephrase.
I can go while you're thinking.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I guess it was kind of, you asked the question about targeted group or larger group, and Marsh kind of said a wide, varied response. I think that would be good as well to get multiple points of view. And I guess one of the questions, I guess, is how do we notify or get the message out there that this is occurring so that we make sure to reach all groups? And maybe do you target the notifications and messaging to try to get certain groups that may not normally attend something like this to attend, and maybe not others? Or do you try to do something that gets out to everybody, or a mixed approach? And I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like there might be, because sometimes it seems like a lot of people don't know about things like this. So if we can figure out how to get it out there as much as possible, that would be good.
Tom, do we have a budget for this?
I won't go on forever. I'll just say there are a lot of ideas about best practices and effective practices on how you can use trusted partners, how you can work through other organizations, other parts of the community. So maybe some of the same people that you might want to do outreach to broadly could help to do that. But again, that's something we can talk about, how to actually do that in Bennington as opposed to in the abstract.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I have one question written down. So kind of what I want to see from this listening session is seeing us define, because rather than define, since we're so early on in what we're doing, really defining our responsibility to the board in the way the public wants us to address the authority that is going to be given to us, because I feel like we're kind of trying to work within what the town wants us to do, and that's obviously our legal parameters to do that with. We're really wanting the community to guide us in saying that we want to do ABC out of all these infinite possibilities that we can do with the town. What do they want us to do? That's really what I think we should be doing from that session.
So kind of almost like listening for priority setting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
And that would be priorities from the community with what the select board is.
Right, so opening it up to the community to discuss what do they want us to do, and then us having our answers prepared to say we can do that, we can't do that. Because it's hard for us to get the community support when there's, more board members here usually than there are people in the audience. So that's kind of one of the difficult things we have working against us right now.
Okay, no, that's a really great idea, and I think what it makes me think about is what's that kind of an iterative process, right? So the fact that you're doing this outreach and hearing from the community, how does that help to get more people from the community engaged? So people feel like there's that balance, that right balance of voices and priorities, as well as just knowing what folks in the community are looking for. So that's great.
Yeah, Brian?
What else?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great. So
you're a little faded, but yes, they just speak right in that microphone.
Oh, I don't think this microphone reaches you. It just goes to Cat TV. But anyway, what I'd like to see from these, I assume we'd have more than one. I mean, from these kind of listening sessions is, I realize they definitely need to be open to everyone. Everyone needs to feel that they can come. But I'm really interested in hearing from the community that we're kind of describing as being marginalized, perhaps underrepresented. The IACP report made a point of there being feelings in the community that the Bennington Police Department treats you differently depending, in this community, primarily on economic status, but on other factors as well. those are the people I'd really like to hear about. I'm always interested in finding out if the survey that was in that report accurately reflects anything. I don't know what the methodology was, so all I can think of right now is to invite more and more people to come speak to us to see if these are common attitudes in the community. So I don't know how we craft it that way, but I'd like to be able to hear specifically from marginalized and unrepresented people in the community.
Okay, that's a really important point. And I'm just, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about some work that I did through NACOL with Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And, you know, it's different from Bennington, but there are some similarities in terms of kind of broader ethnic diversity and people with very different experiences. And part of what they did was, in addition to having kind of big forums, was having some smaller, like, kind of small listening sessions, almost like focus groups. And again, they weren't exclusive, but they targeted outreach for different communities to try to help provide that sense of safety for people. And sometimes it was people who had sort of lived experience in marginalized communities and situations, mixed with people who might be advocates. So sometimes, you know, you have to kind of have a mix of that, and it can be important to hear both sets of voices around those experiences. So I think there are ways to do that. And again, from what I've seen over the last couple of years, there are definitely different organizations, community organizations, advocates, and service providers that, you know, have those connections. And I think that part of developing this over the next few months is doing that in partnership, both to hear from them how they think, from their own experiences as organizations. They've been able to reach people, but to then also use that to hear directly from people. Hopefully that's helpful. Talking longer than I intended. So are there other thoughts that this conversation so far is bringing up for people about what you're hoping to see, what the goals would be, and how that would inform the ongoing work of the CPARB?
This is the training. I'm sorry. Tortoise, I'm sorry, this is our training.
So there can't be community comment right now, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For right now.
Oh, would there be some time after that's done or not?
I wanted to emphasize what Bill said on this, inviting the public to help you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I should have specified. The question was directed to me, because I was asking the CPARB members. But I appreciate that thought. That is an important thought, so thank you. All right, so I think we sort of started to anticipate the next thing I want to get into, which is kind of how this is framed. And part of that framing is the actual structure. Is it a session? Is it a series of events and activities that lead up to a single session? Is it not a single session? There are different ways to do that. But in some of people's comments, you talked about kind of hearing from the community, getting informed about what community members think priorities should be, what would be the voices that might not be most prominent, maybe weren't reflected in the IC report, or just aren't reflected in general conversation. So if you're thinking about how you want this to land, right, how do you want people to, I mean, those are sort of what you're looking for. How would you want people in the community to understand what this is and why they should be there? I mean, it's one thing to say, we really need this for our work, but if think of yourself as not being part of this group and there's some other board or commission or committee that's doing work, what would you need to hear that would make you feel like it was something for you and that you wanted to participate in? What would be that framing? What would be that way of describing it or understanding it? So again, I'm going to turn it back over to the CPARB members to share their thoughts.
If I may, can I answer that or start off with that? Yeah, Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So
I can definitely hear you.
I think what would convince people that something like this has value is the result of what we do with the information we get. I think instead of trying on the front end to convince people how good it will be, it's important that we take the input we get and do something with it. We're here to advise and review the police on procedures and training. So hopefully the information we get from these sessions will allow us to work with the police department to develop training and procedures that will help the police department to maximize their representation of the entire community. So that's what I think we need to do.
I think that's important for after the fact, but I think that we really need to figure out how to get the people there so we can get that information to be able to, because if we don't get anybody in the door,
Right.
it's, you know.
It's not going to work. I certainly hope we're going to have more than one. CPARB should be around forever. I can't imagine we would have one listening session in 2023 and never have another one.
Yeah, I think that the goal of this one was for, and Brian and Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the goal was for them to have some training for us to get going on the first one.
Right.
And then we can figure out how to do them and go forward, you know,
perpetuity.
with that going forward. Because obviously we're going to have more than one
I would hope,
community listening session. So this is just a first place to start.
Yeah.
That this is sort of a way to kick this off, help you all get started, and also kind of introduce to the community that you are here, this is part of what you do, and to do it in a way that is effective and sets that right tone going forward so that in perpetuity, people are thinking, yes, we engage with CPARB, they're serving a purpose, they're listening to us, they're working with the police. So this is part of setting that framework in the first year of your life as a board.
So one of my questions is going to be whether or not we have a budget for this, because I think that we're going to have to find a place to have it that's, like Marsh said, safe for everybody to come. We just left the forum, and there was conversation about how people may not have wanted to attend that because it was down at the courthouse and that was intimidating. So I know that we have some community Bennington places that we shouldn't have to pay for to have a forum, but I'm thinking if we did want to have refreshments or something to help with that, or, you know, some other things. And I mean, obviously Brian's going to help us hopefully with facilitating, or somebody will facilitating. So if we do have some other ones, I don't know if there's going to be expenses or anything like that, but that's just a question.
If you're talking small amounts of money for like refreshments and so forth, that can usually be found. There's nothing specifically allocated to CPARB in the upcoming budget, which we just sent out to the voters.
Yeah.
But generally, we can pull something out of general fund, as long as it's not a terrible expense. It can usually be arranged.
Is that
You know,
something?
this is kind of a little bit in the weeds, but I'll just say, I mean, one thing perhaps, you know, you could, if there isn't enough for what you want, you could ask for donations from a couple of
Yeah, that was my
restaurants
question.
in the community or something, just to help. And that, you know, that can also be a way to help build those connections, because, you know, the business community, small businesses are part of the community and have their own issues with police, maybe not the same as some of the communities that feel more marginalized. So perhaps that there are little things like that you can do to get what you need and build some connections. But I'm sorry, but I think maybe, Jeff, were you about to speak?
I was just going to say that's exactly what I was going to ask. Yeah, sorry I talked over you.
No, not at all, no. Okay. All right, so what else? What are other ways that you would want to frame this meeting, present it to the public, to the community, so people said yes? So you want, you know, a space that's welcoming, you want there to be an environment like maybe refreshments and food to help people feel like, okay, yeah, this is a positive place. This is not just, you know, we're coming to sit in a room in chairs and watch people and talk to people, but there's a little more sense of community perhaps in this event, this gathering. What else would be helpful? Well, I'm going to pick on some only because I can see on my screen well. I'm just wondering, you know, from sort of where you sit, you know, as someone in the college community, and just the different things you're involved in. What do you think? What do you think? I'm just going to pick on you, not in a bad way, but I'm interested to hear your voice on this.
Okay, yeah, no, I didn't know you were calling on me until you said college. I mean, it's just such a niche interest of people. I mean, I have to be honest. I mean, not everyone's very excited about
Yeah, no, that's great. And also, and maybe not even just, people in college, but sort of younger people who are in the community. I don't want to start saying generations because I never get them right, but, but maybe people under 30, people in their 20s, and just some of the people who are not the ones who generally, like me, come out to public meetings and want to tell you what I think, so.
Well, I was going to say,
So think on it.
I think you
Please.
you said something earlier, and maybe, maybe people don't know us and wouldn't be inclined to come to see us, but if there are other community members that are trusted that are encouraging people to go and also may attend, that they may help draw people that we wouldn't. Yeah.
Right. No, again, you're sort of reflecting something I said, but so of course I think it's a good point. But in all seriousness, I think what that speaks to is involving people sooner rather than later. It doesn't have to be next week, but reaching out to people, kind of saying, once you have a little bit more of a plan and an idea, saying what you're thinking and approaching them and seeing if it meshes with their interests and how they might be involved in helping to get people there. And not just like, hey, can you help us out? But, what do they see as the value of this? What, certainly some of these questions. How would something like this help them in achieving their mission, in supporting the communities that they work with, themselves as individuals? So I think that's just something that you want to kind of bake in as you're doing the process of development. This is part why we're talking about this in January, which might seem really far ahead. Other thoughts?
Well, I agree with you, Brian, in that we need to start planning out how to get the communication out there. Because, people are really Jeff about how people may not come because they don't really know us that well. They might not, agree or understand the whole board's principle. So I think that's something when you start doing this kind of figuring out how we want to advertise. I think getting that out, I would say by like late February or March, and just having a set date and coordinating ways to, get that out to communities, local groups that we've all been talking to at some point, and advertising it that way. It's pretty simple. It's just traditional modes of communication, getting word out there. So.
Great. Other thoughts?
I'm wondering if we would do some with technology, so live, but also the ability to attend either through WebEx or Teams, or I'm not sure how Zoom does with multiple people, but.
No, that's a really important question, and I guess maybe it's a little bit of a placeholder. That reminds me, thinking about how much of this is that is the experience of people coming together, talking with you, hearing from you, talking to you, and how much of it is the experience of people also being able, who can't get there in person, being able to weigh in real time. I assume that there will be multiple ways for people to communicate with CPARB, but there is something about people being able to participate at the same time, even if they're not there in person. So again, just sort of thinking through that experience for people as the planning goes forward. Because I think nowadays, people do want that option. And there are just some people who want to participate remotely because they don't feel like they want to be in a room with other people for health reasons, or it doesn't work for them, or they're out of town, but they want to participate. And they want to participate with people. They don't want to just send in some comments. They want to really see the impact of what they have to say in real time. So I think that's important too.
What do you think about having multiple locations at once? So like if we had it in, say, like a main area, but, just to get the possibility of the connectivity, if people didn't want to maybe come to the firehouse, maybe there could be another small location someplace else with one or two of us and to split it up as opposed to having everyone in one location.
Yeah. I heard someone else say on first.
Yeah, I was going to say that was me, Brian, and I think it's because in part Kelly, kind of mentioned something about being in different locations and having kind of a hybrid model. So for example, if this is held in June, I will not be here. I was telling, I mentioned this to Kelly, I just sent a private email, just kind of setting my agenda for what I'm doing kind of for the rest of the year. And so I will be actually at a police training abroad, studying more about these review processes for the whole month of June. So I guess that's where kind of, just looking at our own individual situations and how we can help. So I'd be willing to not necessarily facilitate, but definitely help bring some energy into that online conversation, into a hybrid model, if we were to do that. That was kind of an idea I had with that while you're pondering.
Yeah, my initial thought is just that it's probably a little early to know, and I think hopefully I'd say fairly soon, in the next few weeks, as there's a little more there about kind of specifics and format and structure, it'll be easier to know what that would look like. And I guess just the tech realities. I don't have a good sense of how much capacity there is. I think I saw Jonah leave to go back to his office, so I know he's not here.
Oh, he's here. He hasn't left yet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have such an odd view. This is interesting. Like I said, it's strange to be on the other side of the aisle. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Jonah, but just in a very general preliminary way, do you have a sense of if that's something that the town could support CPARB in, doing sort of a multi-location?
Hi, Jonas Spivak, Communications Coordinator. Multiple locations could be connected via Zoom, perhaps, but it would be complicated. So I guess I'd like to know how many sites in advance and come up with a plan that would be workable. So I guess the short answer is I'd be happy to explore that, but at this point, I would need more information to understand whether or not that would be possible.
Okay.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And again, not to put you on the spot, but just to have some sense. So I think that going forward, that's going to be part of just the thinking and the conversation is sort of the physical or metaphysical format. I don't know. Okay, that's not really the right use of metaphysical. But, again, in service of what you're trying to do. Because even as we have this conversation, I'm seeing and I'm embracing some of them. There are different goals. There's goals about participation. There are goals about information. There's goals about how people feel about the process. And it's going to be important to kind of, figure those things out, maybe do a little prioritizing. Because as much as I love to bring up lots of different ideas and hear lots of different ideas, one of my mantras about events and activities like this is you in the end, you want to figure out what are the one or two things you really want to accomplish. Because there's this beauty of trying to accomplish 6 or 7 different things. And if you're trying to accomplish that many things, it's hard to really do the core purpose. So just to keep that in mind. So I think this is preliminary, we're kind of brainstorming, and I feel really good about this conversation. I think we're generating a lot of good ideas.
Can I ask a question? Brian? I was wondering, with a listening session like this, say if we had it in a bigger place, say like this room here, can you like break it down into smaller groups, each one with a facilitator, or do you need to keep the whole group together as one with one facilitator?
Oh, well, I think that again, there are lots of different ways to do it. You could have part of the session, sort of, especially if we're thinking that this is kind of a public introduction for the CPARB to the community. There might be a start where you kind of introduce yourselves, frame it, maybe hear some general things or ask for some general comments, but then have smaller groups so people really can have that kind of facilitated time where people get to speak more. And again, some people like to speak to a big group. A lot more people, I think, like to speak in a smaller group so they can really get their voice heard. And then you can think about the balance of reporting back to the big group, reporting out later. So again, I think there are lots of ways to do it. And depending on what you're trying to get, how you're trying to engage with people, what you want their experience to be, you might really want to have an opportunity for people to be in smaller facilitated groups or, lightly facilitated groups even, to share, but then to make sure that that information gets captured in some way. So it's not just a great conversation.
Jeff?
I had a question when you were talking, and part of it started with the conversation about the Zoom part of the meeting, if that happens. And I think our goal is to get a feeling from the community members in Bennington, particularly. It's a public meeting, especially if it's Zoom and people is there a risk of getting input from people that aren't members of the community? And maybe that's not a real risk, but, if we're hearing from people outside of Bennington, does that change the results in a way that isn't what we're looking for? I don't know. Yeah, just a thought.
Yeah. No, that's a really important thought, and I think that's one of the balances. To some degree, I think, it depends on what's happening. If there's something that's come up that would make people want to come to Bennington, virtually or in person, more likely to be virtually, to have to say their piece or to share their perspective, or to, I think just to be honest, when there's opportunities like that, people may come because this allows us to spread the word about our organization, our organizing campaign, our narrative. So there is that risk, and I guess it is probably greater if there's a virtual component. And sometimes that's okay. I think that also can be part of how you do the work leading up to it, is if there are, depending on what you want to be the sort of the end piece, the final piece, whether it's a big session or a couple of sessions or however it's done, thinking about, does the work that leads up to that also give people an opportunity to have voice, whether they're in Bennington or out of Bennington and want to participate. But no, that is a real concern, and I think that the nature of these issues, it's something that, that conversation is not getting less important in our society. People really still care deeply about policing, law enforcement, community safety issues. So I think it's a really good thing to be mindful of, Jeff.
I think it's worth the risk, though, because I think, the possibility of somebody who wants to attend remotely that maybe for a multitude of reasons doesn't want to go in person. I think that's just, it's worth the risk to get that accessibility.
Yeah, and do we try to identify, though, people that are participating, if they are residents or not, so we can understand?
Well, a lot of times.
Maybe we'll just know by what they're saying, I don't know.
Well, when someone comes up for public comment, we ask for name and town of residence, it's.
Can I just add one more comment about a Zoom hybrid meeting? If we were to have a public Zoom hybrid meeting, generally, I would recommend that it be an attendee-style meeting so we can control who shows up on the screen. Because one of the unfortunate problems with a widely advertised Zoom meeting is you could have Zoom crashers. This was something that happened
that's been a problem.
Fairly frequently, especially at the height of the pandemic. And it can be very disruptive to a meeting and can really be at cross purposes to what you're trying to accomplish. So I understand what you're saying in terms of access and people feeling comfortable, but I was thinking when I first commented really just about the technical side of it, but if we want to consider the social aspect of what could happen with the hybrid Zoom meeting, that's another big factor. And if you do have it that way, which does raise concerns for me just because of the sensitive nature of it, I think Jeff makes a good point. It's nice to know that there are people that are actually here because they care about the topic, not because they want to make a big splash and shock people in a meeting.
So like with WebEx, they could register ahead of time.
Right, and you could also do other things in Zoom to control access, but then that makes it less accessible for people versus just watching it. So there's a trade-off there. So I just wanted to share that point that Zoom meetings or any meeting that's via the internet where anyone in the world can come in can be very problematic, and that should be part of your calculation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Here in Bennington, too, we also we draw people to work in town from other communities, from Hoosick Falls, from, North Adams, wherever, Shasberry. And they also probably do have interactions with the police and may have something to contribute to the conversation as well. So that's another.
And I was thinking too, there might have been people that lived here that moved out of town that may want to have input as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, all good points. I'll start with the last couple and then back to Jonah. Just my quick commentary. I think you're right. I mean, that's been part of the framing, from my understanding of this whole process, is people who kind of live or work or really spend a significant part of their lives in Bennington are part of that community that you care about. So, there's no absolute that you're going to guarantee this or forbid that, but I think part of how you frame it helps to attract people who kind of fit in those categories. And then just to Jonah's point, I think that those are all very important points. I think we sometimes forget what it was like at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were all learning how to use Zoom, and before we were setting up webinars with panelists, and it was just kind of a welcome everybody. There were disturbing things. So, and again, that's that balance between wide open accessibility and providing an experience that is useful and helpful to yourselves as a board, but to community members who participate. I mean, if you have something that it's really open, but then people, that was the most horrible thing I've ever been to, that's not necessarily getting there either. So it is always about striking those balances. Excuse me. So are there other thoughts or comments about kind of this framing, openness, accessibility format piece?
I wonder how the IACP gatherings functioned and what things they may have learned that might help us in our process.
Yeah, and I don't remember if they talked about their information gathering process. I don't know if anyone else remembers if it was focus groups or interviews or how exactly they gathered their information.
In the report, there was some reference to it, but it wasn't detailed in any way. And I'm sure there are people who are involved in it who live around here who we could talk with and pick their brain. Mm-hmm. Both community groups, like you said, who participated in help getting people out, and at least Jim Baker, who's on the IACP group and lives near here, so.
Yeah, as I recall, they did large groups, and they also did individual interviews with folks throughout the community, and they had a written survey as well. So they kind of did a mixture of techniques.
Do you know, Tom, how they went about putting together the smaller groups? Because I went to at least one of the big, listening sessions, but I didn't. And I knew that they had smaller groups, but I didn't know how they got the word out or who they targeted or what.
Yeah, I really don't recall, and I wasn't on the board then either.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was one of the people in the community who went to those forums too.
Yeah.
And so I really don't remember how they organized all that.
Yeah.
All right. So again, I will just say that there's certainly not the only source of information about how effectively to do focus groups, but since it was something that happened local, it would be interesting to find out more about that. So, all right. So I guess I'm thinking about moving into the next part of that's on my mind, but I don't want to cut people off. But where I want to go is to think a little bit about how will this session or this process maybe even connect to other initiatives. I know there's a communications committee that's just getting off the ground that will be thinking about these things. Research committee, which sounds like it's more about effective practices in oversight, but whatever work you're planning to do, how does this tie into it? I mean, I've mentioned a few times this idea of reaching out to trusted partners or community partners or other organizations and starting to build those connections, in part to help bring people to whatever process you want to create. But yeah, what else is going on? Like, for example, You mentioned there was this judiciary session, this judiciary forum just before. So and this is really the question. I mean, I don't have a whole bunch of ideas in my head. I really want to both hear from you, but have you share with each other what else is going on around this, what else do you foresee your work including that will connect with getting and gathering information, but also leading to an effective community listening session / process.
Wow. That was a lot.
Everybody's so quiet.
Yeah. Brian, could you kind of condense that question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking us.
Too much question. Yeah, basically, what other things are you going to be doing or do you want to be doing that would feed into this? Outreach you plan to do, communications you plan to do, outreach to even build a session. Like I want, like, what's the connectivity? What is this process and the ultimate session going to connect to in your other work?
Well, I can tell you we've also created an outreach committee, and one of the things we're trying to do with that committee is invite initially kind of leaders of social service agencies, such as UCS, GBICS, Coalition for the Homeless, to come to our meetings and talk to us about their organization's experiences with the police and perhaps their clients' experiences. And then through them, hopefully, we'd be able to make connections with their clients to come to something like listening sessions that we'll be having. So that's part of what we're doing is trying to figure out ways to reach out to the community again to get as much input from people as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I guess I would just say I think that's like a perfect opportunity to talk with them also about what you're hoping to do more broadly in the community. And does that make sense to them? Do they see that as a value to the people they work with and their organizations? And if so, how could they help to do that?
Right.
And I think that, kind of bringing them into that conversation, recognizing that some might say, that's a terrible idea, we don't want to be part of that.
Right.
And maybe if everybody says that's a terrible idea, you rethink it. But I think that's what I think is like, that's the kind of thing that's an opportunity to do both and, right?
Right.
So are there other similar generally kind of things like that people know about, or other activities going on in the community?
This was the second forum that's been held locally that a couple of us went to. They had one on hate-free Vermont.
Right, at the high school.
So, I've just been trying to go to some of them and see how the formats are, and what's working, what the challenges are, and as far as the I don't want to say technical end of it, but the setup part of it.
Yeah, the hate-free forum was sponsored by the NAACP Rutland, which serves our area and two other Addison and Rutland counties. And then this came out of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this was judiciary.
Yeah.
Say, Broad.
This was more interactive. I thought that
Tonight.
The hate-free was more presentations,
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to more, like today was more questions.
More questions,
It
right.
just seemed that there was more engagement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they were both short.
Right, they were short.
And also a big audience for any kind of lesson. I mean, it only came out or was this planned longer? I only heard about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they did their agenda schedule, but we just found out about it the other day.
Yeah, I did as well. Okay.
We heard about it at the NAACP meeting about a week and a half ago, and I called up Sue Allen at the Banner and said, this seems like it would be an important thing, but I don't think anybody knows about it. So she gave us a front page article in the Banner, which certainly was helpful.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to, well, Joan is our expert he'll help us with all
Right.
that. So he's really good.
Say, Brian?
Yeah?
Yeah. One thing, I don't know if there is training like this, but one thing I'd like to be able to learn before we do these sessions is kind of how to evaluate the input we do get. I am interested in how people feel the police treat them, and just to listen to someone say, well, I got arrested, so I don't like the police, that doesn't really tell us anything. I don't know if there's any way to kind of take all that raw data and just include all of it in our thinking, or to be able to kind of parse it a little bit and figure out what's valuable input from people. Or is it all valuable? I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. I think, to be honest, that is one of the challenges about a lot of this work is when you hear this information, what's valuable, what do you do with it, what do you need to know, how to parse it. I mean, social scientists, they do this stuff for a living, and so there is, there's very detailed literature out there about how to do it. There are also some simpler ways to kind of collate information, try to look at where it's coming from, and not do like a detailed academic analysis, but really try to see if there are trends. What are 2 or 3 common themes that are coming up? What are things that are focused in certain apparent groups? Seems like certain groups of people, certain age groups, certain areas, certain work versus are there things that are universal? So I think that you can do that kind of work without it being a social science academic paper. And I mean that's something we can talk about more, but I think also can find some even just some readings to help people kind of think through that.
Good.
Jotting that down too.
Brian, I have a question. Following not strictly, but essentially a mediation process, but not as formal as that. But that would kind of address what Robert was saying and get us down to some kind of agreement format of what we want from that session to go back to our meetings and so on. That's how I was appreciating it.
I think that we have to remember, no matter what we do and what our goal is when we go in, the community might change that. Because we may go in and have, we might have a list of questions, but it's, it's a listening thing. So they may start to come in and the conversation may even go in a little bit of a different direction than what we planned. So I think we need to leave that flexibility in there. Whether it's something where we have some questions that we want to, make sure that get answered, or some questions in case no one wants to ask questions and we need to get some dialogue started, which is why I think it's important that it's more than an hour, because I think people need to get comfortable before they start to open up.
Right. Brian, also, I feel like I might be kind of like eager beaver here, but I feel like we're kind of talking maybe not getting, or not on the same page, not necessarily that we're not getting it, but could we kind of open in more to what you're thinking? Because I feel like that might clarify some of our thoughts. Not trying to pressure you.
No pressure. I mean, I guess I would say, I sort of said it before, my inclination in life is to do, that you do need to have these kind of big community forums, recognizing that there's limitations. And again, as this discussion goes on today and after, it might turn out that that's not the right thing. But I think that, being able to think about how to do something like that is broad and open and can work for a large portion of the community while not being absolutely perfect is also an important exercise to go through, because you, as much as you may want to, you can try to listen to distinct communities and hear from them. At some point, you have to be able to feed things back and speak to the whole community. So, I mean, that's kind of addressing your question well. That's sort of my inclination, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to, say, no, you won't be doing the right thing unless there's a big community show up and they go to the mic and they speak to you. Because I think there's lots of different ways to get the information. So that's why I keep saying it's partly about what you get out of it, what you do with it, but it's also partly about what is the experience experience that people will have. I think back to Kelly's early point about this is going to be, in a way, a public introduction to the Bennington community of who you are and what you do and how you listen to them. So.
Can I ask, do we go into this open and to where anyone can talk about anything, which I think probably is part of it, but then I guess, do we have the CPARB goals as directed by the select board as in the background to try to understand how those conversations fit to our goals from the select board? I don't think anyone would want to not have the ability for everyone to speak freely, but it seems like a lot of it, I don't know, maybe it all ties back to those goals, I don't know, or maybe it's a great thing. What's the goal of it? Is it just to hear people's stories and concerns, or is it to somehow lead into things that will help achieve those goals? I don't understand maybe how they connect, and maybe they don't, I don't know.
Yeah, no, those are great questions / points. I mean, again, and now Tom is moving into my screen, so I see Tom. But I think that, you always want to be mindful of those goals. And I think that I'm assuming in something like this, there would be some presentation. And I should just say out loud, I totally agree with Kelly. I think an hour is not enough for just about anything that's involving more than 5 or 6 people. But you want to kind of tell people what you do, why you exist, what your goals are, and that is to some degree the framing for it, right? I mean, if people want to come and talk about, the tax rates or the issues of the Ben High project, and they see that as related to public safety because of their concern about what's going to happen. I mean, you want to gently kind of redirect them or say this is probably not the right forum for that, although we appreciate what you're saying. So you do want to have a container, recognizing that, some people push the boundaries, some people ignore boundaries, but most people, they come because of what they hear it's about, And so they're also going to appreciate that there is a pretty clear container established for what the conversation will be, and then they get there, and it mostly is within that container. Again, I think you have to decide how big or small that container is, how much you feel like it's helpful, necessary for things that fall outside of that to come up, and then from kind of a facilitation point of view, just managing that process. Sometimes you do have to just let go, but I think that you do want to be relatively clear with people about what the broad goals are, what you're hoping to get out of it, and then be flexible as people share. Hopefully that's an answer. But again, I just think those points, questions you raised are really important to be thinking about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question that comes to my mind, which I don't know if it answers your question to us, is that it sort of rose in my mind as I was listening. What do you, the people who are coming here, want your police to know about you or about your lives? One of the things in community policing that grabbed my attention and hope is that police officers would better understand what life is like for people that they're coming to meet, and that people would have a sense that that understanding exists.
Okay, I think I understand you, Mark.
Okay.
Let me kind of dig in a little bit. So are you saying more like people who just want to come and share what it's like to be, whatever identity that person is living in Bennington, and not as specifically about interactions with the police or their ideas about public safety?
That might be a possibility. That's the kind of, but there might be both. It might be being who I am, what is it like to relate to the Bennington Police Department, but it also might be, what do I really wish the police department knew about me and somebody like me as they're relating to us, which may not fit in this initial meeting either. It's just a hope that I have.
Yeah. Okay, oh, is that Scott?
That's me, Brian.
Hey, Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late. I got tied up out of town.
Sorry, Brian, I got distracted because the camera keeps moving. Oh, now I can see the whole table. This is great. Now I can see me again. So, no, I mean, I think that's an interesting question, Marcia, because again, think about with like a facilitation hat, you have to provide a little balance. And I think you probably don't want to advertise it as, hey, come share what it's like to be you so the Bennington police are more aware of you. But if someone comes with that as kind of what they feel is important, I think that's okay. I mean, if you end up having an hour of 5 or 6 people talking at great length about, what it's like to be them, that may not accomplish the bigger goals, the broader goals. So.
Yeah.
And then I'll just say, so Scott, we've been sort of talking through what are the broader goals for this, community listening session and effort for the CPARB and really for the town. Then a little bit about, how is this session going to be framed? Is it, is it about getting information? Is it about people being able to share? We talked about some of the different formats. Is it one single session? Is it one session with multiple locations? Is it all one big conversation? Do you break up into smaller groups? And I don't think there were any specific decisions, but just these are things that are coming up as parts of the conversation. And then we've just been talking about how does this connect to other activities, other initiatives, other ways of reaching out and connecting with the community. So that's kind of where we are, I think, in brief.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think we're going to try to move us into something that's come up a lot. It's like, what other information does CPARB need to do the planning? I mean, there's some it's just making some decisions about the format, but maybe that's informed by other conversations. And we were talking about the outreach committee connecting with directors and staff of different organizations in the community to find out more about the people that they work with and support and what those experiences are like. What else do you need to know to be able to effectively plan? Questions about Zoom and Zoom format. What else? What else do you need to know? What are you feeling like we can't really do this unless we can answer these X number of questions?
Brian? I would say more than anything, we need to figure out how to get the word out to people. Going through organizations like UCS will help, but separate from that, we've got to figure out a way to get the word out to everyone, but at least for me, specifically to the people that I'd really like to hear from. With no local TV station or anything really, broadcast TV, I don't really know how we get the word out effectively. The banner seems to be the only way.
I think, I think first of all, there's a lot of ways that we can get the word out. I think Jonah's expertise, we're very fortunate to have CAT TV. We have other media options available in our region that I think would do it. But I think it's very important to get the word out, but I think we need to decide what are we going to get the word out about. Because if we don't, it's all great to say, hey, we're going to have a listening session in June, but tell me a little bit more about it, because if I'm going to come and do that, if I'm from the public, I want to know a little bit more about what am I going to get out of it before we start saying, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, if we pick a date, saying, hey, save the date, coming soon, that kind of stuff. But sooner or later, probably rather than later, people are going to want to know a little bit about it. And then, maybe, I know we've got a training in February, and maybe we'll get more into it there. But defining, is it going to be something where we're going to take, yes, we're going to do 2 hours, we're going to do 3 hours. Are we going to break it down into topics? Or are we going to have some questions? Are we going to maybe do some breakout groups? I think that we have to kind of get that a little bit outlined before we start advertising it too much, or we may lose some momentum.
No, I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's some balance. You kind of have to be doing both things at the same time, but I do think that unless people already feel like, oh, it's CPARB, I want to go to their event, which I'm sure there are some people, you probably do need to have some of that framework, like what's the structure, what are we going to talk about? It doesn't have to be totally set in stone, but to be able to give people a picture of, if I put this on my calendar and show up, what is it that I'm going to be doing and getting out of it? So.
And Brian, what are your thoughts about involving the community members in the planning? So like, we have some people here that are here at every meeting, bringing them into part of the input for the planning, the actual day of the event, part of the process, or is it something that, because it's our first one, it should be primarily just CPARB? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, my initial thought, or what comes to mind, is that you want to talk to and get information and hear from people, and like certainly, I know this is not the format for it, but the people who are coming, the people who I see watching from the other side of the room, and who have already a commitment to CPARB, whether, again, I don't know who it is, so maybe that commitment is about getting involved and joining. Maybe that commitment is about holding CPARB accountable or something different. I think that's really important, and you probably, as you sort of said at the end, want to be doing this as CPARB. So you want to talk to people, get ideas, listen, but I think you have the responsibility, right, for making this thing happen and making it good and kind of setting the stage for the future work of CPARB. So I think you want to hang on to that piece. Not even so much to control it, but because you're accountable. You're the ones who own that, as it were. I do think that, as I've said a couple of times, talking to different parts of the community can be part of that, right? So, you can't do the entire listening process to create the listening process, but you can do some preliminary steps. You can reach out to different parts of the community, service providers, community advocates, people who do come to speak out. I know Jonathan Phipps, for example, who was speaking in public comment, is connected to various things. So I think there are lots of different people that you can talk to get their ideas and thoughts. And I think that, again, you have to take ownership for creating something that you think will work. So it's not necessarily whatever people say happens, but you really do want to hear from people. So I think that that's really valuable. And then I think that also builds up goodwill and constituency for whatever it is that you do, right? So if you've had conversations with 10 or 15 people who are connected to other people, and those go reasonably well, now you have some other people who are invested in this being a success, whatever success looks like. That people attend, people are heard, that information is useful and can be made use of by CPARB. So, I'm sorry, it's a very long answer to a short question.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So what else do you need to know for planning? I mean, there was a conversation about doing it on Zoom. I mean, how much information do you think you'll need to have to make those decisions, right? How much will you need to know about faces and people's comfort and format to make decisions about format and format possibilities?
I think a lot of that's going to fall into Jonah's lap, because he's the one that actually understands how that stuff works, and none of us do. But beyond that, I'm not sure where beyond that your question goes.
Well, I guess, I'm sorry, I threw a lot at you, as I tend to do. This is part of what I'm tired, so I do apologize. That was one example, but I'm thinking also like small groups, breakout groups, things like that. What information do you need, whether it's like you just need to talk about and decide, or you need to check with people, like what information will you need to decide what those formats or that format looks like?
I think we need to decide on a date and a time. And then once we get the time down, then we can start to develop a preliminary agenda and then work on the formatting. I mean, it's hard, honestly, 3 hours is nice, but I don't know, personally, sitting there for 3 hours listening to somebody talk is kind of hard. So I think if it is something, I'm trying to be nice, Brian, from somebody who has to do a lot of teaching, it is. It's hard. You know, so I do think it's important to have either some breakout sessions or some icebreakers or something that keeps the flow going, but also doesn't make it seem like it just goes on and on without any transition at all.
Okay, no, that's great. Keep going, people. Keep going. This is good.
Well, I think, Brian, for me, you having been involved in this type of situation for quite a while, are there any things that you know of that work well that you could pass on to us, or things that don't work that we should definitely avoid?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I just was last week facilitating a really difficult meeting. So I'm a little, it's part of why I'm so tired, even a week later. So I'm a little bit on the, don't do this, don't do that. But I think that there's not any one thing. I mean, I do think that the kind of standard, everyone lines up at the microphone and speaks in turn for 3 minutes is not great. It kind of, certain people love to do that and run up to the mic, and certain people will never speak like that. So I think that you want to have something where people who want to sort of speak to everybody do have an opportunity, but it's not, I think it's kind of, as Kelly said, it's not the only thing. You want to provide people some space for smaller discussions and figure out kind of how much of that gets fed back to people at the session, so people kind of know that their voices were heard versus what gets reported out, if there's some kind of reporting after, versus what just gets fed into the work.
Brian, is there... I was just going to say, is there any... do you have any opinion on someone having to go up to a podium versus someone going around through the room with a microphone, say, so somebody doesn't have to go up and stand up? Is there anything on that as far as comfort, or I don't know?
Yeah, I guess I'd say a couple things about that. Again, another really good question is, I tend to be, if it works for everybody, more of a fan of kind of having a couple of wireless mics and having a couple of people that can go out into the audience for a couple of reasons. One, just very practical, and this is going to sound like the controlling facilitator, but I'm just going to say it, is that if you're holding the mic while someone else is speaking, then there's still some ability to kind of manage the conversation. And not to cut people off or control people, but sometimes you do get someone who, if they have the mic in their hand, they're going to talk for 10 minutes. And it's pretty much not going to happen that you're going to say, can you please hand me the mic right now? I mean, and the same thing can happen if someone's standing at a microphone, but it's a little different dynamic, because then there may be other people in line waiting to speak. But I do think that the other thing about being able to go out into the audience, if there's an audience, is that you can sort of balance things out. And sometimes people feel like that's not the right thing, but my experience has been that in the end, you often get a little better mix of people if people can kind of raise their hands and they don't have to get up and stand up and wait at the microphone line, or come up to a podium and speak. I think there are people who love, I'm one of those people, who love to get up in front of a group of people and speak, but a lot of people it feels more comfortable to be in their seat, kind of around the people they may have come with. They're sitting there to speak out, if that's something that can work.
And what about something like, I call it a fishbowl for cards, where they could just go in. If I don't want to get up and ask a question, I can just put something in a fishbowl, and then somebody can come in. And maybe that would be more of a time fill if there was, like a gap. But something.
That's a really great idea. It's something. I appreciate that also, because it's not something I tend to do, but I've been part of those processes. And I think that it serves a couple of really good purposes. One, which you just pretty much said, so I'm going to kind of repeat what you said probably. People can just write things down who don't want to get up. It also provides a different kind of question, because if you're going to write something down on a card, it's not going to be standing up and making a 3-minute statement. And then it does, as you say, if there's a time where people aren't really speaking, you can kind of share some of those things. And I guess you want to think about, that just reminded me, how much of it is people sharing, how much of it, if any, is Q&A. You know, my thought has been probably, without being conscious of it, that it's more people sharing. But there might be, right, you will probably have people who get up and ask questions. What is the CPARB doing about this? Why is the police department doing that? Why did the town do this? And so you just want to think about how you want to handle those as well, right? I mean, it's a little bit like public meetings. You know, do you have a place where people make comments, another presentation? I mean, this is, obviously the idea is to listen, so you probably don't want that, but just thinking about how does that flow go. So anyway, again, very long answer to, I think that that's a really good addition to many meetings, especially when you have people with different speaking styles, comfort levels with speaking at the microphone, and it gives you a little bit more ability to keep the flow fresh and interesting for people who are attending. Other thoughts?
Yeah, Brian. Well, I thought we were kind of moving on now, but I just wanted to hear more about like this recent forum you held. How was it handled? How was it facilitated? I'm just curious of a recent example.
Well, I won't go on long about that, because I would say it was a public meeting after an officer-involved shooting. So his emotions were high, and it was a combination of community members and activists with a range of different efforts, organizing efforts. So it was a very complicated meeting. And I'd say I facilitated at least dozens of public meetings and hundreds of meetings, and it was one of the most difficult ones I ever facilitated. So it's probably not necessarily a model. I don't anticipate that what you're looking at is going to be something that challenging. But I will just say that knowing it would be difficult, I personally spent a lot of time really thinking through with other people, because it wasn't just my meeting, you know, kind of what the structure was of how I wanted to open the meeting, what sort of meeting norms, community agreements I wanted to ask people to agree to, and really tried to hold the space for people to have a really difficult conversation when emotions are high, and people had very different reasons for being at the meeting. And I think it worked about as well as it could. I've gotten praise and criticism, but that was much more about trying to hold the space so that people that everyone who came who had questions or wanted to speak would really be able to, and that it wouldn't just be the people who were most aggressive or loudest being able to communicate with officials and the community members who were there. Okay, so I want to try to jump back a little bit. I'd be happy to keep sharing my thoughts and ideas, but what other things do you need to know? I mean, some people talked about, you know, the decisions on date and time, preliminary agenda, you know, how long it is, how do you kind of handle the back and forth of people speaking, how much do you involve the community members in the planning? You know, what sort of things tend to work and don't work, and then of course how to get the word out to people about what it is you're doing. But what other things do you feel like it's going to be hard to move forward if you don't know?
Say, Brian?
Yeah?
Would the police be represented at this kind of listening session?
I think that's a question for all of you. I mean, my sense from this work and from Bennington would be that I think the police would want to be there. I guess I think that you have to decide if they are just there as members of the community, I mean, with a specific role to listen, or if you want them to share. I mean, is this a listening session about people's experience with the police? Is it about people's experience of public safety more broadly? I think that I hadn't given this thought. It's a really great question because I hadn't really thought about this. But I think that kind of framing will help you decide, do the police have a specific role on the agenda? Do they share? Are they there to listen? Are they there to participate as members of the community?
I think they need to be involved. They're one of our major stakeholders. I think they need to be part of it.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but we work that out.
Yeah.
So one of the things that strikes me is if the police are there, how do they present themselves? Do they come, for example, in civilian clothes as a participant, or do they come dressed in uniform with guns? And I think that, if you know, I would hope we certainly wouldn't deny police to participate in the event. But I know just from my study of clothing that when people see a uniform, it stirs a whole bunch of emotions that aren't there when they just see a person.
Yeah, and we've talked about this with our meetings. So I think, my opinion, and the rest of the board can speak up, is that they need to be there. They're a huge stakeholder in this. And I think if somebody really is uncomfortable with it, I think we can ask them to step out for 5 or 10 minutes. I think, they've been pretty open to that when we've talked about it here at the meetings.
If people are uncomfortable, going back to your fishbowl idea as well.
There's
if
other things.
If they want to remain anonymous in their opinions, their comments, their feelings, whatever, the fishbowl opportunity would be available so they could put something in, the police will hear it, but they would never know who it came from. So if the police are present and they're in uniforms, which do include their firearms, and people are uncomfortable, they don't want to speak, the fishbowl would offer them an opportunity to make their opinions known, but keep their identities completely anonymous.
Yep.
I'm gonna agree with, I think, both Kelly and Scott and Brian too, because I think you kind of were saying they're gonna want to be there. They are a major stakeholder, and I think, Marsh, back to your point, I think that's what Brian was saying, is that we would discuss that later on outside of this meeting about how we want them to present and be involved, and that would be something that I'm assuming Paul or Cam or someone would approve in the department.
Should we ask them if they would like to participate, and then get their input, not that they would
get their
control
input.
it, but just discuss with them,
Yeah, I mean, if it were me, I would probably kind of ask in an open-ended way, we're planning to do this. Imagine you want to participate. We're still trying to figure out the exact format. Do you have any thoughts, recognizing that we haven't figured this out yet? Because I think you want to be open, but also you want to remain. This is still CPARB's event, or series of event, or whatever exactly it is. So. But I think that, that's right. You do want to talk with them because they are a major stakeholder. And you want to be very conscious of what Mark raised, that there may be people who are like, I'm not going there if the police are there. And that also doesn't mean that, it may just mean that you have to be doing some other things in addition to the big public meeting where the police are. And figuring that out along the way,
I think having the police there could only have a dampening effect on the participation we would get from people. I
disagree.
I just don't see it contributing to what we're trying to do. And, they're being described as a major stakeholder, true, but in this conversation, they are the only stakeholder who's being given a special place. We're not trying to have a panel of stakeholders. For some reason, we're talking about the police as one stakeholder having a special invitation. And that aside, I think...
Robert, you're looking to specifically exclude them.
In all practicality, police presence could only have a dampening effect. on people's participation.
So I guess, I hear what you're saying, Robert, and I think that part of the balance is they don't necessarily have to be a special stakeholder. They don't have to be panelists or present. They could really just be there to listen. And I think that's why I was thinking, I mean, you may have a situation where whether it's, you know, the leadership or maybe one or two officers just come in and they want to speak. You know, I mean, if a police officer just shows up, I don't know how likely that is, and wants to come up to the mic or have the mic brought to them and say their thoughts. I mean, it's hard to say that they're not permitted to be there. But I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think that's part of the consideration about what is their role, right? I mean, because we still haven't come up with exactly what the format's going to be. I've suggested that you want to do some sort of presentation about CPARB, but you may not. Maybe you want people from the select board to say something, maybe you don't. Maybe you want the town manager to say something, maybe you don't. I think those are all open questions. So I think I don't think that you have to lock yourselves in quite yet to the police are going to speak or the police can't be there, but I think you want to be mindful of these issues because these are important issues.
Is there anything you...
Kelly, I was going to say, I think you were trying to say something and I started talking probably.
Is there anything that you think that we're missing? Anything, like you're asking us what we want to see and everything, but is there anything that you think that we might need that we're missing?
No, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think it's quite yet, but I think you do want to start thinking about how do you report this back out? Is it something that you would talk about at the next CPARB meeting? Would there be some sort of summary of topics discussed? I think you probably don't want to get into trying to do a transcript or anything like that for various reasons. But I think part of how you figure out what to do is going to be what are you going to do with it? I mean, there's certainly the incorporating what you learned into the work of the CPARB, but there's also how do you reflect back to the community as a whole what you've heard and let them know. I won't go on about that. That's the one thing that's on my mind.
Yeah, no, I think, Ryan, you kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say you really pointed it out, but from something you said, it's made me think about this and how we're talking about how the police are a stakeholder in this. But in the way, I mean, obviously the wider community is a stakeholder, but you can't get 15,000 people that, just all reply and be part of that. So that's kind of what the select board is that representative democracy in action. And so going to them, which we're kind of already through them in a way, so we're kind of conjoined in that sense, but really reaching out to them so that they can kind of market that to the broader community, and us kind of doing that with the police in a way. So it has like two groups. I don't know if that makes sense. I can elaborate on that later. I don't want to take up too much time.
Well, I guess let me just, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Are you saying that kind of reaching out to the select board to have them help with the outreach and letting the community know that this is something that is hopefully important for the community to be part of in the town?
No, I feel like the select board's been very helpful so far in giving us kind of that voice and space in the select board meetings. More so, I wouldn't say more so, but we just happen to take advantage of that opportunity more than other boards have. So I think that's just something we need to utilize and realize as a strength we already have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense, I think.
Well, I think we can use the select board meetings because they do have public comment, and we can get up there and mention, that this is coming and use that for another avenue to get the word out.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And then, I know Jonah has resources through the town for some social media and that sort of thing, and other newsletters and communication. There is the banner.
And Cat TV.
I read it on a little app, so I probably don't see everything, but, so it's accessible from Massachusetts. And I think the only other thing I would say, I kind of want to, I guess it's sort of leading into the next thing, is, and then that's probably about it, other than any next stuff, but this piece around kind of conducting, I wrote down in my original framework for this, kind of conducting interviews and background research. And I guess the idea is, as you develop this and talk to people, how do you really do that in a way that's effective, right? How do you reach out to different organizations, different stakeholders, and find out what they would be looking for, what would bring them to something like this, what would they hope to get out of it, and then some of the questions that I've tried to answer, but I know we have some active researchers here, just thinking about a little bit for yourselves, like what are some of the things that you want to find out? I know, Kelly, you spoke about going to other forums, the differences between the No Hate Forum and the Judiciary Forum. So what are some of those pieces that you can, as members of CPARB, either in committees or individually, do to kind of look around and say, okay, this is what else we are seeing in our community that's worked. Marsh mentioned what did the ICP do when it came to town. So I think it's kind of, I bring us up and sort of throw it back at all of you who are Benningtonians about what will be effective in kind of those conversations or interviews, and then looking at what has worked in Bennington, and maybe what has not. I mean, there's always, sometimes looking at what didn't work is not so exciting, but maybe there's things you can learn from that as well. Like saying, if we went to this forum, it was too short. That's something that didn't work. I mean, that's a learning that you can use. Okay, I'm framing for a great amount of time, so I'm going to stop framing and open it up to the CPARB members.
So I was just thinking about how the task force that formed us went at getting input from a variety of places. And one of the things that the 11 people that were on that group did was break up a list of a dozen or so community organizations and split up and go talk to each one of them to interview them to find out who would be people that we'd want to hear from, what kinds of things. So I think we could do something like that that would get us a way of reaching a variety of groups.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I think that then you guys just need to be clear about so it's you're all on the same page of what those conversations look like. I mean, that's sort of that effective. They should probably say effective conversations, but because it isn't just what do you think about policing. I mean, that may be part of the conversation, but it is about I think how can we do something that brings together people from the community that will actually attract people and be helpful, and would you want to play a role in that? What would lead you and your organization to want to engage with that, to get people to come?
Robert, can we start to draft something like that up from the outreach committee? Sure. Some of those questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. What else around this? My favorite question, what else?
Well, if we're going to talk about a CPARB presentation at the beginning of it, I do think that it needs to include an introduction of what CPARB is, but also I think that the purpose for that listening session has to be identified. And I think that might be one of the first things to start with.
I think that's very important. I mean, it's almost like a clear call for the meeting, right? I mean, if you're going to invite people to come out for something, you want to be clear about what you're asking them to come out for and why they would want to come there.
And I think we need to identify that, what the purpose is at the beginning so that expectations are out there, that people know hopefully what we want to gain from that, but also what they can do to participate and be heard.
Right.
Well, expectations should be known in advance so people have time to prepare.
Yeah.
And when they show up, they have clear thought patterns of what they want to discuss, well, hopefully clear, what they want to discuss with us. And I don't know how to do that. I mean, we've got the informational kiosk down on the Four Corners now. We've got pop-up shops that are popping up. Maybe we could participate in some of those. Just going into a bigger meeting, have several smaller ones to kind of just get a feel for the community and present information on what we're going to be doing at the bigger event. Kind of a lead up to the bigger meeting.
So would that be in with the meetings with the groups like UCS and GBICS and
Yeah.
things like that? Would you want to see ahead of time and then fine tune the agenda?
Yes.
That makes sense.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of that. Was there two sentence summary?
We were talking about reaching out to the local agencies such as UCS and everything, and finding out what they would like to see, and then developing the agenda to try to get their buy-in so that we can get some participation from their clients. Was that?
Oh,
That and having an agenda available before the day of the meeting, so people, when they arrive, they know, they have some kind of an idea of what's going on before they get there. I guess the more prepared people could be, the better for us, if they have some time to kind of really just mull over what they want to discuss and think about what they want to talk about, really formulate their opinions over time, instead of just showing up and saying, oh, this is what we're going to be talking about. And then off the cuff try to talk for 3 minutes. So the more prepared we are, the better prepared the public can be when we present ourselves to them.
I think the agenda should definitely be out sooner rather than later.
Right.
no, I think that's right. And it's probably not a big complicated agenda. It's really just, outline of what's going to happen, and then maybe a little description of the process, and, kind of narrative form in 2 or 3 or 4 sentences. So. But yeah, I think that's exactly right. You want people to know ahead of time, and that will be informed by those conversations with partners, stakeholders, others, however you want to define them in the community.
Say, Brian,
Yeah.
can we get facilitator training? If we had an event where we had breakout groups with individual facilitators, I don't know how to facilitate discussion. Are there guidelines or any kind of training we can get to be effective facilitators?
Yes, and it's one of the things I do for people actually very often. But there's lots of stuff out there, guidelines about how to facilitate well, and a lot of it is just about being clear about outcomes, being clear about process, being clear about meeting norms, being a little bit flexible so that you don't lose control of things, and just trying to make sure that everybody has a voice and everybody's heard. Some people don't want to speak up, and that's okay. You want to, but yeah, there's lots. I'm sure there's even online training, but there's a lot out there. And again, I can help with that if you want. There's other people that can, but definitely love it when more people want to get those skills, because I actually think that the skills of facilitation help us not just to facilitate other people, but they help us ourselves in meetings and other conversations. So, all for facilitation training.
Brian, can you get some of that into our February training? A little bit of it?
Great.
In the February or the May, if you can't do the February.
Will that incur an extra expense?
I don't think so. It just might cut some other things down, or it's one of those things where I'm not by nature a consultant, It's all kind of an open world for me to be in. So I think that I mostly want to be fair to myself, but I'm not somebody who's going to I'm not like a lawyer who's like, oh, that was a 15-minute conversation, I'm going to charge you. I want to be reasonable and fair to everybody involved, myself included, but certainly to Bennington. I know that, every community is dealing with inflation, and all sorts of costs are going up way faster than inflation. So I'm certainly not trying to milk the town. I really want to support you, so. For example, I don't think we need to go all the way till 8 o'clock, so. I'm just looking at my little note. What else are people thinking that they're like, oh, how's this going to work? How are we going to figure that out? Are there other things?
One question that's on my mind that may or may not be pertinent, but is how does the police department present their interest in these events? Are we bracing ourselves to try not to get beat up too badly, or are we really wanting to get to know our community and hear their concerns and hopes for us so that we can be a team together? And I don't know how that fits in any of this, but that's something that sticks out in my mind.
And I'm sorry, just to be clear, you're saying that you're not clear about how the police are looking at that.
Or how I feel pretty confident that they're pretty open about this, but I don't feel confident that the community senses that clearly and strongly.
Yeah. So again, this is off the top of my head. I hear that, and I think that's going to be important work for the CPARB to participate in over time. Mm-hmm. I think right now you kind of want to get your feet under you, if that's a phrase. You want to kind of get yourselves going, and I think that's a medium to longer term goal to help support the police in doing that. But first, you have to really establish your own work and processes and credibility, and then when you have trusted relationships with more of the community, you can better help facilitate some of those conversations, whether it's literally facilitating a conversation or creating spaces for that, or thinking about mediation almost like shuttle diplomacy, where you're sort of being a carrier of messages back and forth to help build understanding and trust. Other thoughts before we sort of get to next steps and follow up? I'm hearing crickets. All right. So I know you have a system for minutes. I don't know if the Martian is taking minutes, but I don't have a ton of notes. But so I do have that. I will add some facilitation training to the February session we're doing, and I know that Kelly asked Robert to draft some questions. What else do people? I think Jonah has some stuff he could look into, but it's still a question of, I don't know that Jonah has anything to do before there's some more decisions made about format. But there probably are other next steps that I didn't capture, because I'm not so much trying to capture them myself, but to make sure that we leave this time together with people knowing what the next steps are and what they might be responsible for.
Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I think that's a great thing, and I'm a little concerned about how we hope to accomplish that. In that I've been typing as fast as my fingers can go, but I'm not sure that's going to make evident without a lot of work what the next steps are and who's responsible for them. I'd love to have a review, for example, that I could write down. What are the next steps and who's responsible for them?
Okay, well, let's see, I'm gonna draw some random things.
Good.
Kelly mentioned a clear description of what the meeting is. And, I think it'd probably be a draft at this point, but I don't know if there's someone who feels in a position to do that work. At least start something that could be discussed at your next meeting or next conversation.
I would suggest that this is something that as opposed to us all sitting here, that the outreach committee could possibly get together and put together some kind of rough framework, bring it to the board, talk about it, go back, tweak it. But it seems like the ideal kind of task for the outreach committee. That's what we're doing. We're trying to reach out.
I think it's a combination between the outreach and communications, and maybe even a little bit with research.
Right.
To be honest.
Take a piece.
I don't know. How do we do that without getting in violation of the community meeting, public meeting laws? That's too many people.
So I think, and you can
bring
correct
our
me if I'm
reports
wrong.
to the board at large and then
Yes.
discuss what each
Yes.
committee has come up with.
Right.
So you're saying we'd ask each group to draft their thoughts?
And then get them
About
to
the
me, and
purpose
then
of the
I'll
meeting.
distribute. Yes.
Okay.
Give each committee a tasks and then report at the next meeting to the board at large.
Can that be just an agenda item at the next meeting and we just brainstorm it and
Yep,
get it done?
can be prepared.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I think just thinking about some of the stuff that with the task force, it might be easier than having two different groups trying to kind of accomplish the same thing and then merge them together. But I don't know, Tom, as the select board liaison and expert in all things open meeting law, et cetera.
Yeah, stop that. Yeah, I would definitely much prefer to see them brainstorm it in an open meeting rather than have, these two groups can't talk to each other outside of an open meeting.
Okay.
It just can't happen in any way that I can think of that would be proper. So, yeah, I think that's the way you should do it.
All right. Sounds like a good plan. So, the next, I guess at the next meeting, the next regular meeting, you will brainstorm the clear description of what the meeting is, and maybe even how the meeting will go.
Would the outcome of that be an agenda then?
Yeah, I think that, so what is the meeting, what's the outcome, what's the basic, I don't want to say like the format, but kind of how is it going to go? What's going to be the flow of it? Because that's all part of how you describe it to people. We're going to get together, it's going to be this, we're going to do that, we're going to come up with this, and then that's what we'll do, so. Looking back at other notes.
So for my
I don't know that you are, but I'm going to ask people still that are at the point where they would say the outreach committee or something would start having conversations with other stakeholders, for lack of a better term, about this and what they might have to say?
Yes.
Are we too early in the process, or do you feel like you're ready to start doing that?
I think that we need to start doing that because we need to make sure that we have some buy-in from all of the agencies. And I think if we start to involve them from the get-go, so like I was saying, if the outreach committee can start to make up some questions, not necessarily agenda items, but some questions to go to the agencies. What are you looking for? What can, we want to do this. Are you interested in participating in it? If you did, what would your organization be looking to get out of it? And then brainstorming, with the agenda items. Jack, I'm sorry, this is a training for CPARB. If we have time at the end, we'll ask for public comment. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
I'm-
outreach will draft questions, they go to agencies about what they're looking for, if they're interested in participating, what would they want to get out of it or something like that. And I guess just not to get to the weeds, is it just agencies? Are there other entities? You know, I'm just making this up. You know, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, that would also make sense to talk to. And that's that. I mean, you don't even need to answer that. I guess I'll say think about that as you do that work. Just think about how broadly you want to captain that, recognizing that I've heard repeatedly. There's a real interest in hearing from those who may be more marginalized, and recognizing that you still want to make sure that you hear from. I would say you want to, in my opinion, you want to hear from a broad section of the community, while making sure you hear those voices that are less often heard. I mean, if you don't want to just do like an even call to everybody, and then you just get all the people who always come out for public meetings, and you don't want to exclude them from the planning.
Yeah, and we got some when the task force functioned, we got some very different shades of input from different groups, like the American Legion and VFW groups brought similar perspectives and different from other community groups that weren't all just service agencies. So I would definitely encourage going beyond service agencies.
Yeah. And I think I would just say, if people agree with that, for two reasons. One, so you hear all voices, just in general, but also for, I think, this group to have legitimacy for the long term, you want to make sure that you're centering those who are most impacted in many ways, while also making sure that you're really doing this for the whole community, right? So it's that balance of ensuring that those who really have a need, or even perceive that they have a need, get what they need, but also not turning into, this is another advocacy group for A, B, and C, right? It's a tough balance, but I think it's one that your group is well placed to meet. So.
I have a question for the minutes. We talked about this clear description being drafted in committees and coming back for general discussion, and then we talked about brainstorming. What did we conclude?
So, Robert, the outreach committee is going to get some questions together for to ask people, groups, agencies, or something like that may be interested in. And then at the next meeting, we will do brainstorming on the basics for the meeting. What is it, that we want? What's our basic format? How's our flow going to be? Agenda.
Are
Jeff?
meetings required for this as it's training?
Pardon?
Are meeting minutes required because this is a training session?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like the...
You're pretty invested in it now.
I'm not invested in producing minutes out of this. We have a head nodding.
It's still a meeting.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding
I would
is
think
this is a training session within a
meeting.
Yeah. So we do have to have minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And thank you for taking them.
You're welcome.
Let's see, I was looking back at the notes. I know. Does it make sense for people to, whether maybe individually or maybe or someone take it on, to kind of look back at personal experiences or others about what they found effective and less than effective in these kind of forums? I think, Kelly, you were talking about just your own experience, and maybe other people were as well, but is that something that's to do to kind of try to, it doesn't have to be like an essay, but just even maybe bullet points about, this was great, however it would work. I don't think it needs to be like an analysis. This meeting was great because A, B, and C, and that meeting was great because E, F, and G, but just what are things that people have found good and not as good?
Well, I liked when, in the couple of forums that I had talked with you about, one person did walk around with a wireless microphone, which made it, I thought, a little bit easier for some of the people that were participating. I could see the challenge in that because there was a person who pretty much did a publicity thing for a media outlet she was running. So I think it was good where you said, to kind of not lose track of the microphone. I thought that it was interactive, when it's hard to get people to start to talk. Once people start, then sometimes other people will open up. But I like the one this afternoon. I thought it was a little bit more interactive. It was more questions. I can see where a presentation at the beginning of the meeting would be helpful, but I wouldn't want it to be all presentations. I would want it to be, more interactive.
And did I understand, Brian, you were suggesting that we do a little brain thinking on our own and bring some things in for further discussion? Or were you thinking we should be doing that immediately?
I guess I was just thinking that, like what Kelly just shared, that's what I was thinking, whether someone is given that as a task, or just people can come back to the next meeting or something, with just a few things like that. I mean, I'm not thinking about a big report, like a 5-page document, but just, here's 2 or 3 things that I found helpful, or I went to this meeting and there are a couple things that weren't so helpful. I think just so that you can all share your experiences and help shape what you think will be most effective for the community. And I think then as you have conversations with some of the community groups or other entities, you can also share that, here's kind of what we're thinking, here's what we're hoping for, we're sort of thinking about this kind of format, and again, I think that's up to the people doing those conversations. But there's more things that you can kind of check in with people if you think it would be helpful. It wasn't something quite as it could be someone is tasked with it, or it could just be people were thinking about that and bringing it back.
What Kelly offered seemed like a good example of that, and it seems like maybe next time or sometime soon we could all take a chance at that rather than doing it tonight.
Yep. Put some thought into it and
I guess
come
I'm
back.
just saying, I think brief rather than longer, because you can spend an hour talking about what you like and hate about meetings.
Is that all? Just an hour?
Let's not find out. So, all right. Are there other next steps that people think need to happen to follow up on this conversation?
I just think we need to set a date, because that way we can start working on a location.
Yeah. So to the extent that I'm still a placeholder facilitator, I believe I looked at my calendar, and if you're thinking about a Saturday in June, which is probably kind of came, not completely, but somewhat from me, let's see, the first Saturday, the third, for some reason I don't have the second. Right now, I'm sorry, is the third?
3rd, 10th, and 17th.
I think the third is our retreat, right?
No, our retreat's the 20th, because originally it was the 27th, and then you said the week before or after, and I think we decided on the 20th when we talked.
Okay.
Because Will's out of the country in June.
May 20th, okay. Yeah, so, I don't, and the thing is, I'm really not in Bennington, so I really think that right now, amazingly, I'm available all the Saturdays in June.
Does anybody have a preference on any Saturdays for training in June?
I would think not Father's Day weekend.
Does anyone know what Father's Day weekend is? Is that the 17th?
18th. So
18th?
Yes.
Okay.
it's
So would we want to look at the 3rd, the 10th, or the 24th?
I'd vote for the 10th, the 24th. The 3rd is a really tight time for me.
Yeah, I would tend to think we should push it more toward the end of the month, just so we have time to prepare, especially when we're limited to really only discussing it during our meetings.
Okay.
We have a lot to do, and we only have, February, March, April, and May
No,
to
you
really
can add
discuss.
June, but everything should be almost set by then, I would think, but we'd have one more meeting.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If we did it later in the month, we would have one more meeting in June.
Right.
Yeah, because our June meeting would be the 15th. So we're looking at June 24th. Are we in agreement on that?
I would say the 24th, and that way we do have that one last meeting.
Yeah.
To really
Good
finalize
point.
things and, go over any issues that we do foresee.
Okay,
Are
so.
there any other townwide events that might happen in the summer around then? I don't know. I don't know if they're in June, but.
I don't know if anybody from the select board can answer that. The only thing that I would think that we wouldn't want to interfere with would be with if there were any Juneteenth celebrations.
That would be before the 24th.
24 doesn't have a teen in it, does it?
No.
It's the 19th. It's my birthday.
So are we thinking the 24th?
I say let's just stick to that, and then if
Okay.
it is an event that we happen to see in a week or two, then we change it from there.
Okay. So Brian, you said the 24th was good for you. Jonah?
Yeah, it does work for me.
We good with that? Okay. Cat TV, I hope. Okay.
Great.
All right. Do we need a motion on that? Tom, do we need a motion on that? Do we need a motion? This is a train? No, okay. All right. So the training will be, the listening session will be Saturday, June 24th. Okay.
Well, that was super easy. I'm impressed.
Well, let's go back to that then. Should we? No. No. All right. Location. Should we just start to research what's available and then come back for the next meeting with that?
Yes.
Okay.
There's too many places to decide.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that.
Do you not think here is good?
Well, I'm just thinking, I thought it would be potentially outdoors if the weather's tolerable, but again, we might not want to.
I think weather outside, that's really risky.
I won't be.
That'll be the one day it rains in June
And, or
with torrential winds.
excruciatingly hot?
Yeah. And does anybody have thoughts on trying to have it at the firehouse or another location? I mean, this is a great sized room. They've got, adequate facilities. There's an elevator if somebody needs it.
You have everything you need built in already,
Okay.
paid for,
All right.
and accessible to us.
Okay. So do we have somebody who could check with the fire department?
I'm sorry, I don't want to make it more difficult. I'm just wondering if you're talking about using the room you're in, I'm just wondering if you want something that's a little bit more like an auditorium or something, like in a school, or if that's not so great. I just raise it as a possibility. Whatever you guys think, because you live there, it's your community, so.
Acoustics in an auditorium can be tricky, but
I think this space is much more versatile than an auditorium. I don't know why you would want everyone sitting in seats.
oh, you mean like
all looking.
like in a theater?
In
Theater
a
seats.
theater, yeah.
No.
We
Well, I
can
know one
set
of-
this room up however we want.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise it, because
Yeah.
I was curious, because I don't have a good sense of what the spaces are in Bennington, so
Yeah.
I don't know if.
The space
yeah,
is
there are
great.
Other YMCA schools that have interesting, there may not be, so. I didn't want to just jump to it in case there was something else, so.
I think let's.
I'm happy to be, told no.
Yeah, no, you're so fine, Brian, and I agree with you, and I think we just need to talk about that more in depth.
I do too.
Yeah, I think that can go beyond this meeting, so.
I think if we leave a little time, like for example, I think where we meet could say something to the community. For example, if we met at St. Peter's Church in their hall, it's on Pleasant Street. Pleasant Street has a big name as being a place where the bad people hang out. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm invested in Pleasant Street. It's just letting a little time to think about where and what it says to the community about who's welcome and who will feel comfortable would be a worthwhile, give a little time and space for myself.
I think we can.
I'm making it more complicated when we're trying to end the meeting.
See, you said it was too easy. right? You said it was easy. I think that we should take a look at that and just come and talk about it when we do our brainstorming. See what's available.
Yeah.
Call St. Peter's, see if they're available.
Okay.
I don't know what the fire department has. They may have something going on here. But let's look at our options and see. I know some places they've also done it over at the high school.
There's also
It can be a little echoey in there.
Old Castle.
Yeah.
Right.
They might be willing to work with us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the high school, a nice thing about the high school is it's a place where a lot of the community feels safe and at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
For
And there's
games
ample
and
parking.
events and, yeah.
And
And there might be, it might be in, it might be different spaces in the high school where it'd be good to meet.
Well, and you know what, I'm good at making things complicated, as much as I try to simplify. Especially if there's an idea of having breakout spaces.
Yes.
I know that there may well be spaces like that in the building you're in, but I don't know, so. But like, a high school certainly would have classrooms and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
A church may or may not.
Yeah.
well, if somebody has an idea, if someone has an idea for a location, bring that idea to the next meeting and then just kind of maybe see if it's available or something. No commitments, no promises, but just, I would hate to come and say, oh, hey, let's go to the high school. And then have them say, oh, no, you're not allowed to get in there that day because we have something else going on or something like
If somebody has
that.
an idea of a location, they can call.
Yeah, and
We've
just
got a
see
date,
if it's, yeah.
and just say, hey, on this date, for a few hours, we want to do this with the CPARB. Would it be available?
Yep.
And just kind of get a verbal yes or no on whether or not it would be available. When you come back to the meeting, you can say, well, I called this place, it's available, this is the facility, this is what's available to us, this is what they have for audiovisual, just the basic details you can get with a phone call before the next meeting.
Does that complicate things for you, Jonah? If we're off-site in a non-town, if it was with AV?
Possibly, but I'm actually checking when graduation is this year, and that could affect it also, so.
Yeah.
Not sure yet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we can talk about that at our next meeting. Try to get some.
Okay, so that was the last thing on my mind about next steps and follow-up. So, I'm about to hand it back to Kelly, but I guess it was before I do. Is there anything else that is burning, needs to be talked about? I'm not leaving much space for that, so I'm hearing no. And again, it's nice to see everybody, even though I'm not up there with you in person. I really have come to like Bennington, so I look forward to being able to actually see you all and spend real human time. But again, I'm so glad to be able to keep working with you, and I really look forward to helping you make this a really, really successful board and really support your community in this. So thank you. Thanks for having me continue on this journey with you.
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask if you can just hang on for 1 or 2 more minutes. Jack, I did see that your hand was up earlier. Did you have a question in Tortoise? I don't know if she's still there. I can't see because the podium, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity since we're ahead of schedule.
Yep, Jack Rossiter, Munley, Bennington. I was just wondering if as a basis for beginning to plan this event more concretely, if at this stage the board members might go one by one and say how they individually envision these events and what they hope to get out of them.
Well, I'll start. I just envision these events to hopefully be welcoming. The one that we're starting with is going to lay the groundwork. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of things that people want to accomplish that may or may not happen with the first one, but I just want everyone to remember that this is a start for us. And I think that I hope to at least start to bridge the gap with the trust and getting the community to know us and have the comfort level to come in and speak with us. And I'm hoping that once we have some of the listening and when we're done with that June session, that we're able to find maybe some trends for policies that we should start to look at, whether it's something traffic-related or complaint-related, or, so I'm hoping that it will help us identify some of that. And I'm hoping that it's also going to help us identify a couple of areas for questions, because the town survey is coming up later this year, and I'm hoping that we can get a good couple of questions for CPARB on that survey. So that's what I'm hoping, just to start. I'd love to have a whole lot more, but I'm not sure at this point. But I want to start to talk and listen to people in here. So anyway, that's me, and we'll start with Scott and go down the board.
You covered pretty much everything well. The big thing for me is just giving the community a voice and hearing what they have to say. Based on what they're saying, then we can make decisions on where to focus our time, our energy, our thoughts. So it's basic. It's a listening event. Listen. Based on what you hear, you make decisions to move forward. And I've said this quite a few times. I see this first group of people as we're creating the foundation for something that will be built stronger. And this is just going to help us lay just the next layer of that foundation as we move forward.
Okay, well, let's see. My vision for this event, I guess, this is my vision, so I see it being here. I think this is a good facility. It's a well-known facility. Everyone's welcome in a firehouse. So off the top of my head, I see this as taking place in two parts. One with the entire group, people, maybe CPARB telling people what we're about, giving people the opportunity to get up in front of a group and tell everyone what they think their opinions are, and then to break out into smaller groups where it could be facilitated more as a conversation. I could see using the IACP survey as a way of engaging in that conversation. I am really interested in trying to figure out if the results that we've seen in the survey accurately reflect feelings in the community. If we determine that they do, then we work with the police on procedures and on training to improve their performance in these whatever areas we think they need to improve in. If we find out that these attitudes, these feelings don't accurately reflect the feelings of the community, then we've got to figure out why those feelings are out there, and perhaps it's a public perception issue. But either way, this information will guide us in doing what it is we're supposed to do. So.
Marsh?
I'm going to pass. I'm so busy writing I can't think.
I'm going to pass as well, because I think everyone's summarized anything that I would have said.
I guess for me, it is similar to what other people have said, but I guess I look at this when I read through our goals from the select board. One of them is fostering collaborative efforts within the community to hear all voices. So I think that's really, it's a communication channel to achieve that goal. And then hopefully for me, as an outcome from hearing that communication, is to be able to figure out how we use that to help achieve those other goals. What the community feedback is will help us understand these other goals that we have and how best to achieve those, to address those issues.
Tortoise, did you have a question?
Sure.
And
I'd like to.
I'll get to you after Jeannie.
Excuse me?
Sorry. No, I was just talking to Jeannie. I said I'll get to you after, because she also
had
had
her
a
hand up,
question
too.
too.
Yeah, I almost shoved this over so that I could see everybody.
Oh,
Yeah,
we'll try
I
to
would
move it
like
next
to,
time.
Again, the idea of we are inviting you in to help us, CPARB, do the job that we've been charged with as part of achieving the town vision.
Mhm.
And so this is, it appears to me that it ought to reek of being a bonding and building experience rather than, simply an in-person surveying, listening is good, but in order to show what you're going to do with it afterwards, so that it will be a coalition together. And one more thing, that one of the organizations that's important for you to involve, engage in some way, is the NAACP. Mm-hmm. Because that really is their headline news these days, one way or another. And building it from the IACP, and it's all in the context in this whole community that we're all trying to work for.
Yeah. Thank you. Jeannie? This is so weird, I just have to say. It's like, I'm like, oh, left-handed dyslexia.
Jeannie Jenkins, Bennington. I was just really happy to hear you talking about the schools, because I do think that they are a real asset and ally in this process. And through the SVSU Equity Committee, they are aware that you're thinking about listening sessions, and they have family engagement specialists. That's probably not the correct name, but they have 4 family engagement staff people who are very happy to help get the word out to the families that they work with, and those families, may in fact help you get into bring in voices that might otherwise not be heard. So I would encourage you to use that. And I think Bennell is another space to think about. It is in the heart of the community. It has a lovely auditorium, gymnasium, cafeteria area that could be set up. I like the idea of having something at a town facility, but I also think that for some, this is a very sterile and not usual place for people to come. So just wanted to say that. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other comments or questions from the board? All right.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I just want to thank those of you who are here tonight, and those of you who are listening, and those of you particularly who have been here frequently, that you're listening and giving us input and being present and hearing are a really important part of this becoming a community effort, and not just the effort of a handful of people who are out there in the dark. So thanks to each of you, and I hope we'll hear more from you and see more of you in the future.
All right, so I want to thank everyone for coming and participating. Thank you, Brian. Thank the people that came, like Marsh said. I want to reiterate that. Very excited about the new website. Not supposed to say anything about too much of it, but coming soon, kind of working. Sorry, Jonah, shake your head. Don't tell me things because I can't keep it quiet. But I loved it. It was a big improvement. If nobody has anything else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I guess I abstained because I was typing.
Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.